Hello, welcome to the November 4th, 2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you've not attended the live stream before, how it works is you can simply ask questions in the live chat area or simply send questions in advance by sending it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if we could specify exactly which which version and level of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information will be helpful. Also, if you could specify if it's version 12, 13, 14, and which operating system. And we will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. I may soon get behind with the number of questions coming in, so if you don't see an immediate response to your question, know that we will go through them chronologically as asked. And if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We should have an index of all of the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. Several hours after the live stream ends. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We'll also give a quick shout out to our two moderators. So we have Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They really do this to make it a better community experience for everyone. We appreciate all of their work and efforts. We'll give an extra round of gratitude for Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. It's a great resource of information, kind of a compilation of tutorials, downloads, links that is super beneficial for the Steinberg community. So with that, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And I'm presenting from outside of Washington D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia, in the United States. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, we will go ahead and begin. Let me clear my throat real quick. All right, so we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat Buddy is waving a paw hello and to all the other pets and people, and he's ready to learn. Dwight Cunningham's checking in from the Bahamas. All right, so we see hello, Greg DC checking in from Bahamas. Greg, can you explain the difference between inserting a compressor versus using it as a send effects channel? So a lot of times when we want to, I would say the vast majority of times we would want to use an compressor as an insert because so if we wanted to just come up, let's take a look at, we'll say we have our drum loop here. So if we wanted to put compressor on, we can just come over here. So if we wanted to do it as a send, so generally when we want to share multiple things and send different amounts, we would use like an effect send. So if I come over here, we could add like a reverb as an effect send. So generally what we could do is just come over here. Let's add an effect send to this. So we'll just make it a stereo. And as we do this, we can send this amount, this track out to that, and we blend kind of the dry signal with the compressed or with the reverb. So we're sending it out. So when this is farther to the left or farther to the right, at that point, we're blending more of those different sources together. Whereas generally compression, we want to be able to have the compression just on the particular source itself. So I would, always pretty much recommend doing, your compression just as, if I wanted to come here, let's say we'll go to our black valve. And let me just get Okay, so we'll come over here. So let's say if I wanted to now come over to the black valve. So this will be kind of dedicated to, you know, to just that particular drum track. So we come over here and we run that compressor. So this way it's going to be dedicated to that particular track. Now, sometimes you may run into scenarios where maybe you wanted to take like a whole series of drums. So we could now just come over here. Let's say if I wanted to take a number of tracks and send those to a common compressor, probably the best way to do this would be just to come right over here. We'll say let's add track. And as we do this, we will just say, okay, we're going to come over here. Let's add a group track to the selected track. And then I would place the compressor on the group. But generally we don't want to have, you know, like a balance between. We want all of the compression to be going on. So, okay. Okay, so we have Michael saying, checking in from Rikers Island, New York City. And his question is, hey, Greg, just wondering, Cubase 14 in regards to rendering in place, has the rendering in place then erase option been removed? So when we go to render in place, like a particular area here, let me just add another audio track. So when we do the rendering in place, you get different options if the event is selected versus the track. So right now, if I have an event selected, when I come right over here, we'll just say, and we go to render in place, and we get our render settings, and we go to kind of our source events. I get two different options. But when the track is selected, so not the event, but if a track is selected, that is when we go to our render in place, and we get not only that we could disable the source tracks and remove the source tracks right there. So at that point, you can, so it matters if the event is selected or the track is selected. So make sure if you want to be able to remove that the event is not selected and that the track is selected right there. Okay, so you see Michael says, hope all is well. Just to clarify, I don't live on Rikers. I worked there for 25 years. So yeah, my friend Ryan Burvick, he did like some, he did like an audio production class using Cubase for people at Rikers Island. Seemed like it was a really wonderful program that Ryan was involved with. All right. We see Jan joining from Cubase Index, just saying you can search all the Q&A, 42,000 plus questions. We see Uno Momento joining from Finland. We see Vince as Fly V joining from Winnipeg, Canada. All right, we see Benny joining from Sweden. All right, Best Green Jesus is lounging and lurking. We have Brian Sawyer sending greetings from Yuma, Arizona. Great to see you on. We see Jazz Dude saying F5, F5, F5. All right. Great. So my chat fields jumped. We can go back. All right, so we see Soren joining from Västerås, Sweden. He says he's a little bit under the weather. He has a cold but no fever yet. We hope it doesn't progress for you. Thanks for joining today. We have Rick France joining from Pacific Northwest. We have Brian Sawyer just sending gratitude to Jazz Dude. Says howdy and thanks for all you do. All right, Best Green Jesus just saying a great day to everyone. All right, DJ Stats is asking Cubase 15 walkthrough on Friday, Greg. So if Cubase 15 is released by Friday, we will do a walkthrough on Friday. So the live stream after it's released, we'll do kind of a detailed walkthrough of it. All right, so we see Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. Rachel Zamini joining from Denmark. Okay, Captenergy Music, just joining from outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We have Pablo Vasquez, the amazing drummer from Galicia. Drummer of Hot Mess and many other fine projects. All right, Booze asks, hey, how can I make phase alignment on the audio? So if you have like two sources that you want it to do alignment on, so let's say if I take this particular guitar, I'll take the bass part here, and let's say I want to, I will duplicate this particular track. I'm going to take this track and let's invert the phase. All right, so if we zoom in on our waveforms here, all right, and we'll see that these two tracks out of phase. And we could see kind of visually as we look at it, where we could say, okay, you know, this waveform is going down, this waveform is cresting up. When this waveform crests up, the opposite channel goes down. So one is, if you wanted to just simply invert the phase, is to just come right over here and you could choose to invert the phase like so. You could also probably, let's say if we have our alignment, so if we come over here, if you have two tracks that are kind of like with different microphones, I could just say, okay, I want to go to my audio alignment, and we could select this top one. All right. And let's say we want to take this bottom one. I'm going to bounce this as a source to make it a different file. Okay, so when you look in, let's say we're out of phase here. So let me bounce this selection here as well. All right. And now what I want to do, so let's say the top I want to add as my phase source, and then we could also go to our alignment panel and say, okay, I want this and then we could say align audio, and let's see if the phase is now, and we can see that the phase has been corrected. So once you just open up the audio alignment panel, you could do it from this icon or from the audio menu, and we would just choose, or maybe it's in, I think it's maybe in the audio here, or you could just see, like open the alignment panel, but you could just simply, again, just access this and then pick the two tracks, and then you could knock them in phase with each other. All right. All right, we see that Michael Teams has granted Jazz Dude 1 gallon of raspberry swirl ice cream. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Speedy on. He lives pretty close to me. All right, great to see you on, buddy. Hope you're well. All right, we have Jahian L. Price sending greetings from Granada Hills, California. All right, great to see George from just outside Seattle. Great to see you on. Hope you're well. thinking of the other day when I saw Chapman Stick. All right, he said George just says he said something about Cubase 15, and as Dr. McFarland said, Cubase 15 will be ready when it's ready. Lips are shut. So. All right, you see Pablo says he's preparing his wallet for tomorrow. All right, you see Mark Winslow just sending aloha from Honolulu. Michael Teams is granted Randy of Radar the Band 1 gallon of banana split ice cream. Pablo Vasquez is in the Hawaiian spirit and also gives an aloha. All right. See if we have questions. Sneak in real quick here. Make sure I didn't miss any questions so far. All right, so we see Randy from Radar the Band just saying hello. Pablo saying hello, hola to Randy. And Best Green Jesus, great day to him. Wishing great day to Michael Teams. All right, let me just go to a question that was asked, sent in advance. So the question was, how to copy multiple inserts from one track to another track easily. Okay. So let's say I have an audio track here, like on my guitar parts. And let's say I have multiple inserts on this particular guitar. So let's say we have delay, let's say a filter, and I add, let's say a VST amp rack. Okay, so let's say we have 3 inserts on. All right, and if I wanted to copy these particular inserts to another track, so we could copy them individually if we just hold down the Alt or Option key. We can drag. So let's go ahead and clear my throat. Let's say we want to go to, we'll have our compressor effect here. Now, so if I hold down my Alt or Option key and drag, we could drag one at a time and all the settings would be carried directly over. But sometimes you may just want to copy multiple inserts. So, if, we have up to 16 inserts at once. So copying them to like 16 inserts individually could be kind of a bummer. So if you just grab the top of the window here and so I just want to, I think it's, it's usually just kind of grabbing the top, selecting the inserts here. Let me just try it on a new project here real quick. Okay, so let's come over here. Let's get to hide my input channels. So now when I kind of just grab in the insert slots here and I drag over to another channel, I could just hold down the Alt or Option key, and then all of those inserts are automatically kind of carried directly over. So again, to do kind of multiple inserts, drag from the top of the insert slot here and hold down, and then you can release just like that. So drag it over, hold down the Alt or Option key. You'll see like the little green plus sign appear, and then those could be copied directly over. All right, so let's go back to live questions. Okay. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff says, strange, my first greetings from Sussex in the UK appeared to disappear from the chat field, so take two. Hi, Greg and all, from greetings from Sussex. Great to have you on. All right, so Pablo says he's forgotten his questions again. So it's a great invention called a computer. You can actually take notes. All right, so Michael Teams just says, he's replying to Pablo, says, so we could always ask Greg to run through the free warp stuff. I'm always confused on it. All right, so we'll take another stab at free warp for Michael. So. All right, so when we want to do free warp is just kind of a great way of making kind of like rhythmic corrections in an audio file. So let's say if I wanted to play this particular file here, and we noticed that there could be some timing irregularities. So let's say we're going to take our lead guitar here, and I'll put on the click. So not quite as tight as it should be. So when audio is recorded, audio will be placed directly with, it'll automatically have hit points. So when I want to go to an audio file, we could see our hit points, and if we double click and go into the sample editor, we can see our hit point detection here. So when we have our hit point detection, we have our hit points, and we could modify these as we see fit. So if we wanted to have adjust our threshold, or we could adjust kind of the musical nature of this. So we have hit points, and these hit points are automatically calculated. Now I could turn these hit points into warp markers when we see the create tab here. So I go to create, we can see, okay, let's go to, we want to create warp markers. All right, so once we've done that, and we could also just come over to your audio menu, and we could take kind of selected files. So let's say I want to do this for my lead part. If we go to the audio to real-time processing, I'm going to select two different parts, and these will be like a stereo recording, and I'm just going to say audio to real-time processing. And since we have warp markers here that we could see these vertical lines on the events, I'm going to say create warp markers from those hit points. Now, once I switch to the warp tool, I could come right over here and we could place this into free warp. Now, what free warp is going to allow us to do, and you may not notice it at first until you get to a certain zoom factor. Otherwise, every part you may just see like, a constant stream of yellow vertical lines where it's kind of obscuring the actual audio waveform. So I have both of these events selected. So let's say if now what I want to do is just to come over here and I could move kind of the rhythmic timing of one of the events. Now if I have my snap enabled, so I could come right over here and let's say I have my snap turned on and let's listen to it. So let's say if I want these to be right on beat 2, I could just select both of those events and we could snap that so that that particular note will just fall right on beat 2. So as we come over here, so what the warping is going to allow us to do is just to come over and we could place in warp marks, but as soon as we want to come over to our free warp, and we can now just come over here and just do like small rhythmic corrections. Now if I just have like one note that's out, so let's say okay, like I want to listen to the bass part, so let's say I could just click right here with the free warp tool and we could put in our own warp markers manually. So let's say this note, I wanted it to be directly on the half note here, or right here on beat 4. So I could move this particular note over if we wanted to. Now, one of the things to be aware of is you may want to have a warp marker afterwards as an anchor. So if I moved this warp point here, we can see that it's going to move all of the notes to the right because there's no other kind of warp mark anchor. But if I come here and I put a warp marker after and a warp marker before, I could just move that particular note and it will just do time compression here so that it won't affect the notes after or the notes before when working with doing free warping. So free warping is just a great tool to be able to make those small, simple rhythmic corrections where maybe someone just wasn't feeling the rhythm all the way. Then we could just simply, make those little minor tweaks using the free warp tool. All right, so we see a question from Radar the Band. How about saving track layout for a project to use in another project? So let's say I like this particular layout. I have a marker track, I have a time signature track. Let's say I have a chord track, groove agent. So if I wanted to, I could kind of just come to my project window. I could select all and then just kind of delete. All right. And then what we could do is come over and let's save this as a template. So we'll say save as template. We will call this Radar the Band. All right, so now when I want to start a project with all of these different components, I could just come over here, let's say new project. We would go to more, and at this point we'll just say, okay, let's go to this template. Where do we want to have the audio files that are recorded saved to? I could just come right over here. I'll choose a folder and we'll activate the project. And then we have a template that we could use to kind of start the particular project so that, we have a known starting point. All right, Pablo asks, Greg, do you know if the team is working on improvements for IC Pro? I'm missing several improvements that would benefit the workflow and prevent me from having to use other apps. I haven't asked, and I haven't been in the office in Germany where I would just kind of pop by and talk to different people. I haven't been there since before COVID, so since like 2019. But let me know if there's particular functions in the IC Pro app that you don't want, that are kind of holding you back. Because you do have a whole shortcuts area where you could kind of customize different functions in the Cubase IC Pro app. But let me know if if there's particular functions that you want to go over or would like to see implemented, and I could pass it along. All right, so we see from Michael Teams, it says, howdy Greg, 1 gallon of Kahlua mocha ice cream for my family and myself. Says, thanks for all the great help you've given over the years, always bailing me out for sure. So always glad to be able to help people. All right, Mauro Busetto asks, hi, happy to be here. I'm a Cubase 14 owner. I need info about tempo detection and some audio clips. I would like to decide myself where to put the marker of a beat without impacting the next ones. Okay, so let me just do a quick tempo detection. We'll just import a quick file here. We just do it on a Okay, so let's say we want to just grab, so we listen to this, and we say that we're not, so we don't have any correlation. Okay, so let's say I want to do a tempo detection, so I'm just going to come right over here, go to my tempo track, and choose tempo detection. We'll analyze. Okay, now you notice that when we do a tempo detection that we get kind of automatically placed into like the tempo warp mode. It's figured out what our tempo is, what our signature is here. So it's, tempo detection is going to be done by beat. So I'm going to come right over here, so let's listen to it. So let's say I want to do like an offbeat correction. Okay. Now, if I need to make like a tempo adjustment here, what we could do is just come right over here. So it's already placed us in kind of the warp mode. And what we could do is just kind of hover under that node, and then we could make our adjustment here. Now, as we do that, what's going to happen when we have this particular icon enabled here, this will, as we make a change in our tempo here, that will automatically kind of recalculate the tempo from that particular point, so that, we could, so we could think of, there may be some stuff. So like if I was doing like a serious project, I would go through, listen to it, and then tweak every beat. And often what you're doing is kind of teaching Cubase to, is like, okay, there's a weird drum fill. Like I had a friend that was doing a remix of like a disco song from the 70s, and there's a really bizarre drum fill that ended on beat 2 of the next measure. And that was kind of throwing off the tempo detection. But once we kind of, why it puts you into this mode is so that you can make adjustments as we're playing along. And then, Cubase can then kind of figure out, based on what your assumptions are and what the changes are, to modify the following tempo events. So let me know if that is helpful for you. Okay, let me just... so we see in some audio clips, I'd like to decide myself where to put the marker of a beat. So yeah, just use the free warp tool. Then we see maybe a follow-up to that. It says, is that possible, or is inserting a beat in the middle of 2 existing ones? I did not find a way. So let's say if we have a tempo detection here, and I want to insert a beat. So right now we're in, let's say I'll just put this into 4/4 time. Okay, so we're kind of listening to it now. Now, if I wanted to insert a beat, what I would just grab my range selection tool here. I'm going to set my grid here to beat, and we'll say, okay, let's just, I'm going to turn my snap, enable snap. So we come over here, so we see that this is measure 7, measure 8. So if I wanted to come here and we wanted to globally insert, I could just select it with the range, go to my edit menu to range, and we would say insert silence. And then that would automatically, we could just, if we have that kind of globally set, so let's say I want to do that. We could now, when we go to edit to range, if I have the tempo track selected as well, when we insert silence, it'll actually keep that same tempo value as well, so that the tempo map that's been detected won't be messed up. It'll just be kind of shifted over to the right. But make sure that we have kind of the range tool, and we could globally select and say, okay, I want to take this measure and I need to, copy a measure or whatever we need to do. Just go to the edit to range. We need to give kind of empty time, just choose insert silence, and then we could see that the tempo map and the events automatically shift over to the right. So we could do that without kind of messing up our tempo map. Pablo says, yes, Greg, but he always forgets to take notes of his questions. All right. Okay. All right, so we see Charles K. joining from the UK. Great to see you on. Hope you and your family are well. All right. All right, so you see for Pablo, it says he has several suggestions in form. For example, respecting visibility, agents, panning on mono tracks. Yeah, if you have a list, Pablo, you could, email them to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Be happy to take a look at it, or if you want to share just a link to your forum post. Okay, so we see George says, prop to everyone here learning new stuff. He's been a Cubase user since SX2, and even today I've already learned real useful things. Michael Teams says, always learning. All right, Sue's joining from Mojave in Arizona. Great to see you on the Zoom social last Friday. Great to meet you there. All right, so we see from Mauro Busetto says, of course, my goal is to flatten the tempo track. All right, so let's say we have our tempo track here, and I want this to be steady. What I could do is select the event or events, go to my audio, and then we'll go to hit points, and or to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. So let's say we're here, and now we have our fluctuating tempo. I'm just going to turn this off. So let's say we're roughly like 160. So if I say, okay, let's make it 160 beats a minute. Now we're playing back a perfectly steady tempo. When I go to my tempo track and turn it on, we're playing back our fluctuating tempo. So if I wanted to come here, and we'll just say, let's make it a flattened tempo track. So once we've done the tempo detection, come over to audio to advanced to set definition of tempo. And what this is going to do is basically take these particular tempo events and embed that as metadata. So when we turn off the tempo track, I could change the tempo track to a steady value just by turning this off, or I could come over and say, okay, I want to take this and let's just do a retard. So now we just see the tempo slowing down. Then we'll go back to our original tempo right there. So we could just come right over here and we could edit the tempo. So if I wanted to take like a section of the tempo and just kind of tighten it up, I could just come here. So you get an idea. So once you have the tempo map, go to Audio, Advanced, and set definition from tempo, and then you could freely kind of change the tempo of the event as you see fit. So you could have it play back something that was fluctuating, have it steady, something that was steady and fluctuate it, or do like musical, retards or accelerandos on it. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so Sue's asking, how do I create templates allowing me to send different notes from my score to different tracks using SATB, similar to Divisimate? So if we have, let's just jump back to... All right, so let's say we have a chord track here. And I want to take this chord track and I'm just going to drag it down to like this Rhodes part. So we'll have chords. Okay, so I'll join these together. Okay, so when we look at it, we can see that we're going to have 4 voices of chords laid out for us. All right, and what we could do now is if we come over, like if you wanted to split this up based on that, let's go to like the chords and we'll just say voicings. All right, and I think if we just come right over here, so now when we select this particular note, and let's, all right, so let me just make sure I have this one step right. All right, let me just... Right, but we want to basically kind of set the track's voicings here. All right, let me just go from scratch here. So let's say, we'll follow directly. So let's say if we, but basically we could have these. Let me just see if I remember how to do it real quick. I think it's just going to be on the chord track, but we could have these voices automatically assigned, and then we could split those particular voices. Thought we assigned it to voicings here. But there is a way just to kind of do it, and then, you know, if we have, let's say these are our soprano voices, and these are alto, and there's a way to kind of have this automatically done. And let's say these will be our tenor voices, and let's say bass. Then we can come over, and within the MIDI logical editor, and I think we could just come over, and now we could extract. So we could say we want to extract to a track, let's say our MIDI notes that are routed to a soprano voice. And then we could say, okay, I want this now to do alto. I want that to do tenor. And we want to do bass. And now each of these has automatically been routed to our different voices for us. So you could play around with the logical editor. I'll see if I get that dialed in maybe for Friday's live stream. All right, great to see Rick from Bratman Studio on. We missed seeing you on the Zoom, but I love seeing your pictures of your Halloween setup. It's quite impressive. All right, great to see John Costigan on from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, James Daly just says, how do you have the chord track change loops to the chord structure, or have loops change to the chord track? So it's going to be for monophonic sources, but let's say if I want to, let's go ahead and we'll just do it from. So let's say we have a chord track here. So I'm going to, let's just find a quick loop, something that's going to be kind of more polyphonic, or more, let's say, all right, so if we take this out of musical mode, we could listen to kind of the original part here. All right, so now I'm going to place this into musical mode, and now that we have this particular, I'm going to select this. Let's go to like our chord track, and we'll say that we want to do a single voice. I could come right over here, and let's say, you know, if we wanted this to do like bass, so now. So now it's going to go to G. Sorry, I'll just take this. And we'll hear it go down to G. Up to A. And then back to D. So once we take, and this isn't going to work for, you know, like piano parts that are playing multiple notes within a chord, or guitar parts. It's going to be for monophonic that will follow the particular chord voicings for you. You see John Costigan has received 1 gallon of chocolate cherry mash ice cream. All right, Pablo is happy to see John Costigan on. So Mario Busetto just says thanks. Yes, it is. All right, so we see Fly V says, when I start Cubase, I get a pop-up saying missing ports, being my old keyboard. How can I remove this? So it could be that your particular project was maybe still had a MIDI input port that was routed to it, or your template does. But I think if we go to your studio setup and let's go to your MIDI port setup, that you could make sure that, one is make sure that you have any tracks that are routed to that particular MIDI input port, but you could probably also choose to make those not visible. But I think also you'll have an option to say, okay, this MIDI port for MIDI input was visible when the project was saved, but now it's not there. And then you could choose another MIDI input port to replace it, and then when I believe you save your song, that it will automatically accommodate that. Okay. See Jazz Dude sharing a link for Cubase keyboard shortcuts, macros, and tips. All right, so we see Best Green Jesus as secret sauce chord progressions. All right, so we see from George, who asks, I ask every couple versions just in case it's changed. Is there a method of having audio recorded with musical mode automatically activated without having to go and click somewhere to activate it? So I think, so it's still the same. And I think by default that most people, that could get you into, for a new user experience where if you change the tempo or just kind of, you record something and change the tempo and then, all of a sudden, parts are shifting. There's lots of people that record linearly, who don't necessarily have anything that is tempo based, but, it's just re-recorded, particular audio starting at this point in time, that having that in musical mode. So there's lots of times when we have people complain that they activate musical mode and then, some of the tracks work, the MIDI tracks change, but the audio doesn't. So it's still to the point where, and I think it, I understand the logic of it, that it makes sense to actually have the particular, the particular musical mode set by the user intentionally so that unintentionally things don't change for them unexpectedly. Okay, Pablo says he's doing his IC Pro list, so look forward to seeing it. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer checking in from Mission Viejo, California. Thanks for joining. So we see from George, says, yeah, I can see how that would mess people up, kind of the automatic musical mode. Hypothetical example, I want to recreate the Chipmunks Christmas song. Many tracks would need to be in musical mode to make that work. It says, totally understand why it might not be a feature. Maybe I'll futz around with a macro. So, yeah, I don't think, unfortunately, that, I haven't found like a keyboard shortcut to, but you can, one of the things that you could do with musical mode, and I'll show a different example of this, so you may not have to macro it up, but let's say, if you wanted all the tracks, it's, it's pretty straightforward, I would say, to, let's just revert this. So if you want to select all of your audio parts, you could just enable musical mode right here for all of the parts at once. So that's pretty helpful to be able to do that, so you don't have to do it one by one. You could also, if you go to the pool window, just hit Control or Command plus the letter P, then you could select all the events and activate musical mode directly there as well. So it's usually not too hateful to simply select, all the events in the project window, or open a pool with Control or Command plus P and activate musical mode there. So, it could be, 2 mouse clicks at the most to, get everything switched up. But interesting to hear your Chipmunks Christmas project, though. All right, let's go to another question. That was from last live stream that I didn't get a chance to get to. All right, so we see, hey Greg, checking in late. How can I hide MIDI channels in the mixer but visible in the arrange window? All right, so when we look at, let's say if I added some MIDI tracks here. All right, so now we have MIDI tracks in the middle. So this particular mixer will always be in sync with our project. So if I come here, I could select all of my particular channels, and we go to visibility. I could say, okay, we want to hide those particular channels. So, but the lower zone mixer and the project window will always be in sync with each other. But if we open up, we could also choose to sync project mix console, and there's 4 separate mix console windows. So let's say if I want to come here and I open up my dedicated full screen mixer, I could say, okay, I have my 6 MIDI tracks here. So now I could choose to hide the MIDI tracks in my full mixer, but they're still available in the project window. So when we have kind of a separate mixer, and those mix consoles we could add just by coming over here. We have mix console 1, 2, 3, 4. These could all have independent tracks that are visible but hidden. So right now we don't see any MIDI. We're just going to see kind of our audio. I'll make this a little smaller so we can see here we have our MIDI tracks, but when we come over here, we could filter out particular track types. But the lower zone mix console will always be in sync with the project window. So there's a kind of a direct one-to-one relationship there. Okay, let me jump back to... All right, let's go to next question that was mailed in, or it was from the last live stream we didn't get to. All right, question, is there a way of setting up metronome to play an actual VST instrument for beats? Yeah, so let's go over just do a new project here. All right, so I'm going to just open up VST instrument. Let's do a groove agent instance. All right, so we come over here. Now we want the MIDI to play out of a virtual instrument instead of the particular click. So let's come over, and so let's say, okay, we want maybe our side stick, the rim shot, to be our metronome instead. So we would go to your transport menu to metronome setup. We would say, okay, we want to use, and we could say, okay, there's a MIDI click. And so let's activate. So we go to our click sounds. Let's just see our MIDI output port. So we'll say it's going to be going to groove agent, and I want this to be let's say C#1. So we could just change our particular all right, so let's come over here. Let's say, well, as we play, and let me make sure I have that set up. So let's come to, again, our metronome setup. We use a MIDI click. Now let me put on MIDI channel 1. So now the MIDI, the click track, is not going through the audio, it's just going directly from. So again, go to your metronome setup, and we want to use the MIDI click. So right now we don't see that, but let's go again to your metronome setup. So we could just say, okay, I want the audio click, or I want the MIDI click, and we would just choose our destination. So our MIDI output port, make sure you have the right MIDI channel, and then when you hit, now everything could be going out to a rim shot or whatever other sound that you want the MIDI to be sent to. And there's also kind of other sounds. I know some people will have like Yuri click sounds as something that they're like to use for tracking, but if you wanted to, something else that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of is when you go to, let's say, your different destinations here, is you have kind of the Steinberg click sound, which has been captured in many hit records, but you could also use custom sounds, and there's also, so you could load in different presets, but if you want to switch to like vintage spike, you can now kind of have that. Or if you wanted to audition some of the other sounds, as we come over here, you could put in your own wave files. But just when you get here to click sounds, so vintage spike is a popular one. If you don't have claves or cowbells. Or just use kind of the faithful click track that kind of cuts through everything for when recording. Okay, great to see Val from Vienna on. See John Koskian talking about, Michael Teams talking with John Koskian about cherry mash. There's a cherry center with milk chocolate and coconut, like a haystack. Talking about old ice cream, probably inspired by Halloween. All right, Val was Y42, says he's got a bunch of questions today. Finally being able to react in real time, so it's great. All right, so we see Flyv just says he doesn't have the controller on him to disable it. It doesn't appear in the studio setup. So do you have another controller that it could be remapped to? So, it could be just wanting to make sure that you have, if you save the project, that there is a MIDI controller or one that's kind of being remapped to it. So let me know, Vince, if you have another MIDI controller or not that could be utilized, and then you could substitute it, or you could ignore the message until you have the controller configured. All right, let me jump back to other questions that were sent in. Okay, so we have a question. When I used a chord pad piano fluctuations pattern in Cubase 14, I could play the chords okay in a DAW keyboard and hear them fine, but when I want to record these patterns, all I hear are the chords without the patterns. My routing in Cubase includes all MIDI inputs, but I still only hear the chords alone. How can I record chord pad patterns when I use my DAW? And could I change these patterns using Drum Machine and then save them and use them with pianos? Thank you for any help. All right, so let's take a look. So I'll just load up a quick instrument. All right, so let's say, all right, so we'll come right over here and let's have our source set up. So what I want to do now is we'll go to our chord pads at the bottom, click on our chord pads, and so now we're just triggering our chords. But what we want to do, let me make sure I have the right pattern, piano fluctuations. So let me just come over here. Okay. Okay, so if we want to record that, so I'm just going to come right over here. We'll go back to beginning of our project. All right, so now, what I played was just the notes triggering the chord pads, and then those parts were automatically captured directly in. So we look at the MIDI data here. All right, so now when we look at my MIDI input in the inspector, I have, let's say we go to the routing, I have in all MIDI inputs, I have the chord track. So when we go to the chord pads, you want to make sure that the chord pad is available. You may also want to try if that's, if you're not capturing the chords. Let's see what happens if we have just the chord pads as our MIDI input. So I'll come over here. So, but it seems like it's all kind of recording the pattern directly in. So, but let me know if, try to, instead of all MIDI inputs, see if you get different behavior. If you set kind of under plugins, if you set the chord pads as a MIDI input, let me know if you get the same behavior, but it seemed to work kind of as expected for me with that. Okay, so Mikael Lindgren asks, hey Greg, I can't find a way to add a hit point that Cubase misses when two drum hits are close together. Do you have any tips on how to do that? All right, so let's go take a look. Just enter a loop in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll go into our sample editor. So I can't find a way to add a hit point. All right, so let's say we want to add a hit point like right here on this particular, like right in between those notes. So if you hold down the Alt key and then just kind of click. So let's go ahead and I will just come right here. So I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key and click, and then that hit point has been added. So we could just kind of come right over here, Alt or Option, drop our hit points in, and we can see that that hit point was just added right there. So again, if I want to put a hit point here where there is none, Alt or Option key, and say with the pencil. And then you could just kind of drop them in like that. All right, wonderful to see Lawrence Koch checking in from Rhode Island, a Barn Door Recording. All right, you see Pablo sent the email, so thanks for sending that. All right, so we see from FlyV, Vince says, yes, I do have new keyboard and it appears twice in the studio setup. So some keyboards may have different MIDI ports, like one that's for the keys only and one that's set up for like a MIDI remote control. So see if, you know, like if your keyboard has two ports, there may be, see if there's different names. So when I look at my MIDI input ports here, we could say, okay, let's say, okay, I want to go to my inputs. At this stage, we could just say, okay, we want, all right, like my Nectar Panorama, I have a P4 MIDI in, which is like just the MIDI, you know, like the typical, and I think the SAL in, those might be dealing with the MIDI remote. So while I have one controller, there may be different device communication ports set up for that particular controller as well. All right, so we see from Sue says, last week you covered Hallian 7 using one track to set up multi-instruments to different output channels. How do that if I want it to route from outside Cubase to separate MIDI tracks? Okay, so let's add, not sure if it's Hallian Sonic or Hallian 7, it'll be similar regardless. So I'll do, so we say, I'll do Hallian 7 here. So let's say I have like a multi-instrument and we look at this and say, okay, on this, I wanted to have like my etude piano on track 1. All right. And then if I wanted to add another MIDI track that was routed to it, what I would do is just add a MIDI track. So we have an instrument track initially set up. Now when I go to add a track, add a MIDI track, we'll say, okay, I want this to be on channel 2. This is automatically routed to the same output port when a instrument track is selected. So now when I add, we have a separate track here. So let's say channel 1, I have the etude piano, and channel 2, I want it to have, let's say, hypnotic dance. So we'll say, okay, so now I have, let me undo that because I put it on the same track. So I'm going to select slot 2 and then just kind of come over here, and now, so this track is going to the etude, and this track is when we added it, and we see that when we select the track that the instrument automatically is reflected inside of Cubase. So when I go to the etude track, and when I come here, we go to the synthesizer track, and the user interface all right, so if I wanted to add another sound here, let's say in output 3, let's come over and do maybe a choir. All right. Come over here. So, and let's add another MIDI track. So the initial track will be an instrument track, and then we route MIDI tracks. So let's say I want this to be on channel 3. So now we have the etude piano. I select here, this is going to channel 2 on the MIDI channel 2 on the synthesizer. And when I select, this is routed to MIDI channel 3. So, and at that point, so when we select the tracks, we can see those changes automatically reflected. So multiple MIDI tracks going to different sounds loaded within a single instance of Hallian or Hallian Sonic. Okay, so we see from George says, since I'm bad at letting things go, musical mode toggle, hypothetical solution, project logical editor, set time-based to linear for selected track and change that to toggle, assign it to a key. So that doesn't change the events. What that does is it will change the track here from linear to musical mode, but the events themselves may not be in musical mode. So it changes the track, but not the events. So I haven't found a way of doing it. I'm not saying it's impossible with a keyboard shortcut. I haven't found a way. If you do, but if we come over and I'll just set up the project logical editor. So let's say this, I'm going to take it out of musical mode. All right, so let's go to the project logical editor and say, okay, I want to take selected track. So we'll say our container type is equal to track, and we'll say that the property is set to is selected, and we want to transform that, and we want to go to track operation, and we will say time domain, and we'll say toggle. So as soon as we do toggle here, so we notice that the event is not in musical mode, the track itself is in musical mode. So when I hit this, I have the event selected and the track So say if I have this selected, so this event is still in musical mode, but when we go here to the track and I run this Project Logical Editor preset, we could take that track from linear to musical time base, but it doesn't affect the actual events on the track. So I tried that as well, George. So sorry. And George is saying the chipmunk Christmas song recreation was a hypothetical idea, but now I think I need a metal version of it. He's rolling up his sleeves, getting ready. Getting all ready for your Christmas production season of early November. It's always interesting, like, many times I'm in Nashville in July and it's like, 100 degrees outside Fahrenheit. And you walk into people's studios and they're working on their Christmas albums in July to get them out for Christmas time. And, so it's always interesting. You walk in, it's 100 degrees and you see Christmas decorations all around the studio. It's like, oh, Christmas album, huh? Or, yep. So always a bit incongruent unless you're in the southern hemisphere. All right, so we see from Val, it says, question, lately every MIDI track is not record enabled anymore, like the dot is there, but gray and can't be clicked. All right, so let's say if we come, let's check if we have not connected as an input. So if we have no, so it looks like we could still enable it. There is a preference, Val. So if we come over here, I think you go to Project and Mix Console where there's Enable Record on Selected MIDI Track. So now if I have a MIDI track, just check that preference again. All right, so that's audio track. So when I come here to a MIDI track, it's not automatically turned on. But check this particular preference. So under Editing, Project, and Mix Console, Enable Record on Select. So it's kind of it used to be that the audio track and MIDI track were, together, and then they kind of decoupled it, maybe version 8 or 7. Maybe 6, maybe even a little earlier than that. So, but now when I select a MIDI track, it's automatically record enabled. Let's see if the track is disabled. So let's say we come over here, let's disable that particular MIDI track. So if the track is disabled, you'd probably see that visually, kind of looking a bit kind of demure and grayed out. But if the track is enabled, we could come right over here and so check that one preference and see if that's making a difference. I'll also look, see if there's other preferences that could impact that. So let's say if we go to record MIDI, yeah, I think most of those are pretty straightforward, but check this one. But it seems like you should be able to manually set it even if there is no MIDI port. Let's see if there's no destination, if that has an impact. But it looks like I could record enable kind of as expected right there. But check that one preference, and that could be when you're actually, like when it's actually, selected, that may change the behavior. Okay. Okay, so we see Tiago joining from Brazil. It's great to see you on. All right, so we see Drowsy Eternal says, hi Greg, is there a way to reset all insert settings on all tracks to default at the same time? All right, so let's say if we come over here, let's get to the mix console. Let's say we have, let me just hide my input channels. We'll add a couple more audio tracks here. Okay, let me populate some track presets. All right, so I know that we can, I think if we come over here that we could choose to all right, so let's see if I select all my tracks here. Hold down right shift key this time, that would help. Okay, so I right clicked and we reset. I think that might do one channel at a time. All right, so right clicking here will, the inserts, all right, let me see if there's a way to, maybe in a project logical editor. Let me try something first here. Okay, let's see if I put all these into Q-Link mode. Nope. All right, so let me see if there's a project logical editor that we could set up for this so we don't have to do it one at a time. All right, let me just read to make sure it's just going to be. Okay, so let's save an effects chain preset. We'll call it no inserts. Okay, so I want to come here. Let's go to MIDI remote. Okay, so I'm going to assign that. All right, so let's get to the mix console here. Still one channel at a time. Let me try one other approach. All right, let's try one other quick approach here, see if we can do it. Okay, so let's try. I think we could bypass all the inserts. So, but still only kind of one track at a time. I'll play around with it some more between now and Friday and see if we have kind of a better way to do that. We could, you know, if you wanted to globally do this, but this would be for every aspect on a channel. If we come over here, we could choose, but it's not going to be limited to the inserts. But let's say I want to copy the first channel settings here. Come over here, and then we could right click to paste settings to the selected channels. So, but that would also kind of affect the volume as well as, you know, the send effects as well. So, but I'll play around with it some more between now and Friday and see if I come up with a good answer for that. Okay, so we have okay, so Antoine Van Kampen, this is question: what is the use of linear and musical time base? Okay, just do a new project here. All right, let's get the frame rate set. All right, so let's say we're watching our video here. So with a track that's in linear time base, when we change the tempo, the event is going to stay at its time position. A track that's in musical time base, when we change the tempo, is going to stay at its bar beat position. So let's say right now we have a tempo of 120 beats a minute, and I wanted to just load a quick instrument up. And we wanted to be kind of synchronized. Okay, so let's say I want to, as I'm watching this video here, and I want to record in, let's say we're going to have like right there where those clouds are. Okay, so let's say we had music going on, and I want to, and I'll just go to my transport, and I'm just wanting to make sure that this event just kind of starts right where those clouds come in. Take my snap off. Okay, so say right around that frame, we want that cymbal crash to come in. Okay, so we're going to have that cymbal come in right as the picture changes. Now let's go ahead and let's say so we're at 120 beats a minute now. Let's say I will just go to all right, so let's say I have this recorded, and I want to come over here. Let's say we'll start around measure 9. I'm just going to drop a note in here. So let's say, okay. Just get my snap turned on. So when we want to be able to kind of change a particular okay, so right now this is going to be kind of tempo synced. All right, so let's say I'm listening to this and imagine that this made any form of musical sense, but let's say we have kind of like a rhythmic. And we have this cloud, and I'll just make this part much softer. Let me make this louder. All right, so let's say we're listening to this. We have. All right, now let's say I want to slow my tempo down. So let's say we're at 120 beats a minute. I want to go to 104. Okay, so now we're going to hear the event, like the little synth part, play slower. And when that cymbal crash comes, it's out of time with the cloud. All right, so what I want to do is to have this track, so we're going to go back to 120 beats a minute. This track I want to be in musical mode, but I want this to stay at the same position, but I'm going to put that track into linear mode. All right. So with linear mode, now that I changed that particular tempo here from 120 to 104, so now the cymbal crash is going to be playing at the same time because that's in linear mode. So when I change tempos, linear tracks that are in linear mode stay at their same time position. Tracks that are in musical mode will stay at their same bar and beat position. So now we listen to it, and our cymbal crash will always occur. So say, oh, I want to do 96 beats a minute. The track with the cymbal crash is not affected by the tempo change. So we see that even though that synth part started way before, that MIDI position is always going to be based upon its time position, whereas these are going to be set upon their bar and beat position when there are tempo changes. All right, we see probably a further question on this. It says, question, can you explain the application of the 4 combinations of musical mode on off with linear musical time base? Okay, so let's say, all right, so we see that the linear time base, now events can be handled differently. So let's say I want, we have a drum loop in, so I'll come over here. All right, so now I want, okay, so let's say we have this track and this is going to go along in tempo with this track now is going to be, the events are set to musical mode. The track itself is set to musical mode. So now when I play, this will be in sync with the synth part. All right, now when I take this event out of musical mode, it's going to play at its original tempo. So if we come over here, I'll just drag in that loop again. And now when we drag it in, it's going to play at its original tempo, which happens to be very similar to what we are now. So if I change my tempo, let's say now to 96 to, let's say, 88 beats a minute, we can see that since this track is not in musical mode, even though it's on a track that is musical mode, that it won't be in time with the synth part. So that cymbal is going to be perfect, but when I want this particular event to be locked to the tempo, now when we do this, I place that into musical mode, and now the drum loop will match the project tempo, which is the basis for the synth part that we dropped in. So as we do this, so now if this track was on linear mode and I had this on musical mode, so let's say we play this. Now the beginning of that track, so say we go to 100 beats a minute, the beginning of that track is going to be where that event starts is based on its time position. So if we go back, let's say I change this to linear, we go back, let's say we're at 88 before. So let's say I make this, we drag this file in again. So let's say we start right here on the beat. It's when it's not in musical mode and it's not in musical time base on a musical time base track. Now I changed the tempo. When this is in linear mode, when I change the tempo, this is going to play back kind of at the same start position time-wise. So if we add a ruler track and we switch this to be seconds, we can see that this is going to actually start at the same time position, but when we change the tempo, but if I make this into musical mode, it's going to follow the tempo, but if we make a tempo change, it's going to start, the basis of its start position will be at the time. When it's in linear mode, when it's at the time, it will stay at that same exact time position, or when it's in musical mode, it's going to stay in the same bar beat position. So if you want things to automatically always stick to a visual cue or a specific specific moment in time, you just want to have that track into you want that particular track in linear mode, and audio events can be musical or linear. If I dragged another loop in right here, and this loop was in musical mode but this one wasn't, we could have this track on the same track. This would follow the tempo, this wouldn't follow the tempo. When we change the tempo, if the track is in linear mode, the beginning of the event will follow the particular tempo, but it won't necessarily follow musical mode unless musical mode is active right there. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see FlyV says the old device appears in the drum map setup within the output. So check to see if you set that to like a MIDI device that's currently available. If that will, and save the project, that will probably take care of it for you. All right, Alir asks, is it possible to set cursor follow event in the arrangement but not in the piano roll? Okay. So let's say if I was doing all right, so let's say if we're doing this, let's come over, let's say we have a little. All right, so when we do this, we could say, okay, I want it to have these. I could have my project window and like the lower zone editor kind of automatically synced. Now there's also a function here where we could have auto scroll. So if we come over here, we could say, okay, I want a stationary cursor in the lower zone. So let's say I don't want these views to be synchronized. So we could say, okay, I want this. So now this, we could have that be a stationary cursor where this will redraw itself at a certain time, but the lower zone can automatically just continue to scroll. I'll turn off my loop here. Or if we don't want that, like when we're doing, we could have suspend auto scroll when editing. So let's say if I don't want this to scroll at all, I could just turn that off. And I could do the same on my project window, so I could have this scroll. And let's say I want these synchronized now, but I could have an option. All right, so if I'm doing editing here, I could say, oh, I want to take this note. And now as soon as I start doing editing on particular notes, that could suspend. So if I like select a particular note, say, oh, I want to do edits on that, I could move that note and automatically override the scrolling while editing, or we could turn that off as well. So now if I want it to be synchronized, or if I don't want this to be synchronized, and I want a stationary cursor on this, but not on the top, or I could say I want page scroll here, so as we're going. So this is constantly scrolling. And then we could just hit F here, and when this gets to the end, it will redraw the event. So you could decouple these from the MIDI editor just in the auto scroll settings. And quickly you could turn it on and off by hitting the F key, depending on what is the active zone. And you could choose to have it do page scroll, so when it gets to the end, it's going to redraw the MIDI data, or if you want it to be stationary cursor, or to suspend the auto scroll as soon as you select events for editing. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, Raven 2000 just says, I tried to set up a loop points on the sampler track the other day, but found it hard to get to 0 crossings. Could you show how it's done to get a smooth sustain? Okay. So let's take a look, see what we can. Let me see if I think I might have a file here. Let me have it in here. Okay, so I'm going to go to my sampler track, and sometimes I've found, so I'm just going to drag in this event, and I will do it without it being muted. All right, let's normalize. So let's say, okay, I'm playing this, and we want to create like a sample loop. So let's say we're going to get to the end. All right, so when we want to do loops, let's come over here and we will choose a continuous loop, and then we'll get kind of these little, our loop start, and let's say our loop end. So sometimes I found that kind of like smaller loops, all right, so let me just, and let me just zoom in here, say, okay. Let's check our end loop. So if you kind of, often kind of working with smaller loop areas. So let's say, see if we get this dialed in well. And then let's see if we work with the end. So, but try kind of working with smaller loop areas. So, but I mean, you can play around with it, and it's, it can be like, to do it, a bit of trial and error and finding kind of the right in and out points. But when in doubt, kind of see if you could work with like smaller areas for the loop. All right. So we see from Flyv, it says missing. So if it's in the drum part, can you assign it to another device, perhaps? Like even if you load up an instrument, something like Groove Agent, because that has a MIDI input as well. All right, so we see from Sue, who asks, is it possible to channel audio streaming directly into Cubase to record for educational purpose? Example, chord analysis. So I'm not sure if you wanted to record directly into Cubase. So it could depend on your audio interface. If you have MixKey, you could use MixKey, which is a free Steinberg utility. If your audio interface has loopback, here I could say, okay, I want to set up my UR24C streaming as my main input. I'll just do a new project here. So I'm not sure if you want to capture like audio from YouTube directly in. So if we add an audio track, I'm going to set its input to streaming on my audio interface. All right, I'm going to come over. Let's just get to. All right, we will go ahead and open up just YouTube here. Okay, so let's say if we want to.
With several plugins designed to mix creatively and enhance.
So now I have my system audio going out of here.
The first plugin I want to show you is the new volume plugin.
Right,
now,
so
this plugin can be utilitarian, so you can use it to do even more precise gain staging, or if you want to create gain stages between your plugins, or you can use it creatively in synergy with the new modulators in Cubase 14. Let me show you. At its core, the volume plugin is a volume fader. So if I play back this channel,
all right, so now let's say we'll go ahead and stop recording.
I can just change the volume, but it has some tricks up its sleeve. The first tip is
so now when we come over here, and we can play this back.
Precise gain staging, or if you want to create gain stages between your plugins, or you can use it creatively in synergy with a new modulator.
So you can capture directly in if your audio interface is kind of set up. So let me know, Sue, if that's what you want to do. All right, so we have a question from Benny. It's a strange question, perhaps. Is it possible to have the entire library in Iconica Sketch with one drag assign itself to different MIDI channels? There's more sounds, obviously, in not a direct way, but let's say if we have the Iconica Sketch, so we'll come over here to like a Hallian sonic instrument. So let's say, okay, we'll just come over to our Iconica Sketch. All right, so let's say we want to do typical order. We want flute, oboe, let's say clarinet, bassoon, and we'll do trumpet, horn, let's say trombone, tuba, and we'll say say violin 1, violin 2, viola, cello, and bass. All right, so once we have kind of this set up, so what you could do is just simply save it as a multi-program. So let's say, okay, let's save this as Iconica work. So now we could just come up and, if we have like no particular sounds loaded up, let's say I remove let's cut that program and cut another one. But if we come over here, we could load your multi-program. And sometimes you may have to resketch, but basically at that point you could just say, okay, I want it, my string quartet patch, and you could just come over here and just load up a multi preset. So let me just come to my media bay here. I'll rescan. Sometimes you make new ones. We just so here's our Iconica orc. So if I wanted to just come over, so if we refresh that, so now we load that one instance and all of the orchestral instruments are kind of automatically loaded. So you don't necessarily have to, with one drag, assign itself to different MIDI channels, but once you have it set up once, you can save it as a multi-preset and then just double click and open up that multi-preset so you're good to go. See, Sue is just saying 100 degrees, that's cold for Arizona. All right. Okay, so Steve Green asks, hi Greg, I have an external drum machine. I'd like to add a snare drum sound as a sample to Groove Agent. How and where do I save the sample? Thanks. Okay, so really if you wanted to just capture, you could record it as audio. So let's say if I come over, let's say I want to add, let's say a Hallian Sonic here, and I will just load up like a drum sound. So take the audio outputs of your drum machine, connect it to the inputs of your particular audio interface, and we're going to record it as an audio track. All right, let me just make sure. Okay, so let's say I'm here and I want to capture that particular snare. So a couple things you could do is you could actually, so if it's a VST instrument, I can add an audio track. I'll set the Hallian Sonic 02 as its audio input. And then I could just say, okay, we're going to call this our snare. So we'll come here. Okay, so I have my snare here. I could trim it down. So let's say I just want to take this, and we have our snare hit. Okay, and let's say we like this snare. We don't want to have necessarily seconds of pause before our snare. Okay, we'll give it a little breather room. All right, so let's add a groove agent. All right, so I'm just going to drag this audio file that I recorded right into a pad. All right, so we have that particular snare drum, and if we wanted to kind of dial in and zoom in, say, okay, I want this sample to start maybe just right before. So now when we want to save, we would just right click and we would say export kit with samples if we wanted to use this in other projects. There's a little hidden function here that says export files. It's kind of a black box with a black box with a black background, so it's really hard to see. So if you just come over here and activate export files, we could give it a path where we want so we'll give it a name. So we'll say November 4th, 2025. We want to pick a folder where we want this to be saved to. So let's say, okay, I want this to go, let's say, to my desktop. We're going to come over here. Let's make a new folder. All right, we could give it different metadata if we want. And now when we come over, let's say, to our Finder window, let's get to your desktop. And then we can see that we've just kind of made our preset here, so we could just see our November 4th, 2025. Here's our snare wave file, and then you could open up that preset anytime you want in other projects. So record it as audio, drag and drop that audio file to a pad, and then if you wanted to save it in other projects, right click, export kit with samples, make sure that this little icon is enabled, give it a path, and then you could save and have that snare used in any other project very easily, or sell it to someone, make some money that way. Okay, so we see Val says about the preference. I gave that set, but the solo mute and mute are also not there. Like on my track, it's the main menu, and when that happens, also my record button is grayed out. All right, so make sure, just out of curiosity, if you want to send me a screenshot to clubcubase@steinberg.net, make sure that you don't have, there are different kind of modes here, like preset modes. So you can say, okay, I want standard. If you go to the bottom of like the track list area, so you can say, okay, I want to be in mixing mode, but if you have it very simple, but also just make sure that you right click, and if you go to the track control settings, and you could pick for, audio, sampler, drum, MIDI tracks, you can pick and choose, like some functions may be hidden, and some will be visible, so make sure that those are visible there. And you could also switch between different presets here. So see if you switch presets, if some of those icons appear again. Okay, uno momento wants people to whack the like button. All right, so we see why does the media bay not show any samples when I highlight folders which contain samples? All right, so there's a couple things that might prevent it. So one, if I don't go to the wrong window. All right, so one is, you could have kind of, folders within folders. So let's say if I come over here and I wanted to see my documents. So, we could say, okay, I want to go to this computer, to documents, and let's say I have a bunch of projects in my project folder. So when I come over here, you go, oh, I don't see the sounds that are within that particular sample, within that folder. But if you have subfolders, make sure that these subfolders are actually checked. So you can say, okay, I want to actually come right over here and make sure that that folder, so you may have to expose the folder. And if you see the folder is checked, you can, if you just added something, just come over here, and then you could just right click on a folder and rescan the disks and see if the files will appear there. So sometimes it may take a second for the media bay to update as you record files or make presets, but try to make sure that the folder is checked for it to look in, and also try to right click on the folder if it is checked to basically just make sure that you're rescanning the disk. All right, John Costigan is giving us pertinent legal advice and is saying, as your attorney, I recommend actuating the like button as soon as possible. All right, so we have Zohar Kiab says, Greg, great to be back after months. Great to see you back. Welcome back to the community. All right, we'll say hi to Mark Rabin in Montana in the United States. So we'll give a warm welcome and a big woof to Mark Rabin. All right. We see Jazz Dude has posted a link for the complete guide to music technology using Cubase 14. An Amazon link, and the author has recently passed away, so it's a wonderful book. So if you get a chance to check it out and purchase the book and help support his family, that'd be much appreciated by everyone. It'll mean a lot to his family. So. All right, so we see Mark Rabin says he has family in the ER today, so he's not sure how long he'll be here, but wanted to say hi and woof. So your family will be in our thoughts, Mark. I hope everything turns out okay. All right, Zohar asks, recently purchased Sample Tank from IK Multimedia. How can I get Sample Tank 4 to record MIDI while it's playing? Is it possible in Cubase 12 Pro? So, I mean, you should be able to. I don't have a Sample Tank 4 license, but let's say if I come over here to like an instrument track, we'll do something kind of similar along the same vein here. We'll say, well, we'll just go to like a Halligan Sonic. Let's say, okay, I want to just record so you should be able to, once you have the instrument, so you don't, if you, it's not that you record into So so now that I have an instrument track, I added an instrument track and selected the instrument. And this, imagine this is sample tank 4. And then at this point, we choose to, I come over here, I hit record, and then all right, and if I did everything right, we can see just the MIDI that I recorded right there. And if we wanted to record on another MIDI channel, I could add, just as we showed before, add a MIDI track. And then when we add the MIDI track, it's going to be set to the same thing. We could set a different output, different MIDI channel, and then we could record multiple sounds from sample tank or whatever multi-timbral instrument that you want directly there. So let's say now I want to, play this FM Lab preset. And so that's on channel 2. And if I wanted to play both of them at the same time, I could come here and just select and see and hear both of them. So let me know if I'm misunderstanding the question, but you should be able to just load it up as a virtual instrument and record on the track in Cubase, and then have Sample Tank play that MIDI information. And once the MIDI is sent to it, then it will play back the MIDI information. All right, so we see Raw Justice Hip Hop says number 66 on like, even though I'm having difficulty with my audio today, I can't take time to fix it because he's all set up for his job interview. Well, good luck in your job interview. Let us know how it goes. We'll all be thinking of you. All right. Raw Justice Hip Hop lives kind of across the river, just up from me. All right, so GMT asks, hi, I got a new Octapad and want to record live drums for better dynamics. Is there an easy way to fix wrong hits or quantize them? So if you wanted to, let's say, let me just open up. All right, so let's say, okay, let me just go to like a groove agent kit here. So let's say I want to all right, so let's say I want to, fix things. There's a couple things that you could do that are helpful when we want to actually like record MIDI. So let's say I have my drums here, and we'll see that we could have an auto-quantize. So let's say I want to just kind of play a beat. All right, so I want to do. All right, so I'm going to come over here and just record something. I'll put the click track on, and let's say I want to, so if we click on the AQ here, we could automatically quantize. So as I play, all right, so let's say I come over here. All right, so now when I've played this, all right, so my quantize was set to quarter notes, but let's say I played. All right, so now the cool thing is, even though it quantized on input, I could still come over here and let's say, oh, maybe I shouldn't have had quarter notes as my quantize option. I could still go to my edit and reset the quantize, and now everything was as I played it perfectly in. So let's say I wanted to do a different pass, but I want to set my quantize to eighth notes now instead. So I'm going to set my quantize value here, enable AQ. All right, so now when we play this back, it's going to be quantized straight eighth notes. So if you wanted to just simply, input, and a lot of people when capturing live MIDI drums will just put it in the AQ, and there's no consequences to that, because if we said, oh, it was really awful, at that point we could just reset the quantize, and even though it's quantized on input, it goes back to the original recording for you, so that as soon as you wanted to tweak it, if necessary, the original data is there, so you're not re-quantizing quantized data. When we do a quantize again in Cubase, it always goes back to the original data and quantizes that. So for a lot of people with octapads or electronic drum kits, that's a great tool to have, is just this little auto-quantize on input. So play around with that and see if that helps. All right, so Real Raven 2000 says, I sure hope VST Connect is going to get its normal Friends connection back. Connecting by code is a drag. I'm not sure if it was like a privacy issue. Sometimes we run into that with data privacy things. But I'll see if I could get kind of an answer as to why there is the change. All right. So we see Sue's just saying, yes, thanks. All right, so we see, hi Greg from Canada, how to select all tracks, link to a group track in one click with Logical Editor. All right, so let's give it a try. All right, let's take the first 4 tracks here. And let's add a group track to those tracks. Okay, so you can see that these tracks are routed to group 1, first 4 tracks, and we get to tracks 5 and 6 are routed to stereo out. So let's see if we can select tracks based on that. We'll give it a shot. So we'll just say audio, but we could do audio or MIDI, and let's see. Okay, so now we'll come over here. So we'll say we want to select media type is equal to audio. We could also, if we wanted to insert, and we'll say audio, or if we wanted virtual instruments, here, I'll just start over again. So again, we'll come over here. We want to select media type. We'll say we want to we're going to say media type is equal to audio or MIDI. And we'll say the output equals group 1. So if I had a virtual instrument track that was routed there, so we look at our mixer, now I could just say so let me just check my input channels one more time. And then I think this was a question Dr. McFarland's studio had. I think if we do it this way, we could also say under channel and track visibility, so we could say show only selected channels. So let's say, okay, I want everything here to go to group 1, and let's say I had, you know, a number of audio, number of other channels, and let's say these are going to group 2. So we can say, okay. So now we can say, okay, I want to see and hide all the tracks that aren't in group 1. So I think if we come here, then I'm only seeing tracks in group 1, or I'm only seeing, you know, and if we have these named, we can say, okay, now I only want to see the tracks that are in group 2. So you may have to just come over here. So if we go to our visibility settings, and we could just say, we'll go to here, visibility to show all. So now we could say, okay, I want all tracks that are routed to group 1. I could just come right over there and show only those particular tracks routed to group 1 or to group 2. So we could use kind of the pre and post configurations for that. So that way we could select the tracks and then view them as well. So let's come over here. I'll just so something else that you could try. All right, Studio RF just says, can you show me how to do mastering? It could be a lifetime of work. So there's different definitions of mastering. So someone that's working on a song may consider mastering taking a particular track and saying, okay, I want to enhance the particular track. So let's say if we come over, we have like a stereo track that we want to enhance. So let's say, okay, I want to master this track. So some people's definition or perception of mastering is, okay, I have a song and I want to enhance this particular song using plugins. So let's say, okay, I want to run, and let's say as the song kind of kicks in. So we may want to run like some EQ, something like frequency, and where we can put on a kind of linear phase mode. And then some people may want to run some dynamics. So let's say, okay, let's like a limiter or compressor. So let's go over here to your dynamics. So if we wanted to come over here and get more gain out of it, and then if you wanted to run like some imaging on it, so if you know, so some people would consider kind of that process mastering. Other people would go, okay, if we're mastering, we're probably mastering for maybe if we're doing like a collection of songs for an album or a CD, where we could come over and open up a program like Wavelab. And so when we come over here, we could just say, okay, as we come over here to Wavelab, I want to make each of the songs like on my CD or album or streaming. I want to be able to, so Wavelab is a separate program, but we could say, okay, like I want all my tracks to be similar volumes. So if we come over here, we could say, okay, let's go to, you know, analyze, and we could do kind of a loudness. We could come over here to process and say, okay, let's get to a meta normalizer, and I want to match the loudness of this clip for everything. I could just kind of come over here again to the meta normalizer and say, okay, let's apply, and we could adjust the volume of all the clips to the selected clip. So if I say, okay, this is my volume that I want for the rest of the tracks, I could apply that. And I wanted to make sure that, you know, this track wasn't so much darker sounding than other tracks. I want to work on my transitions. I need to do analysis of this for, you know, to see where my peaks are. If I wanted to see my loudness, we have full kind of loudness. So if we wanted to do a quick loudness analysis of this, we could say, okay, how is this going to be for loudness standards for YouTube versus Deezer versus SoundCloud versus Spotify? So we could do analysis on that. When we go to export files, you know, I could have it export multiple file formats, multiple file resolutions to independent folders. So, you know, files that are optimized for particular streaming services, for high resolution delivery, for CDs, you know, and I want to have all of my, you know, metadata within the audio files themselves as well. I want to come over to my album, and here we could just say, okay, we want to, you know, generate all my ISRC codes, so stuff like that. So if you're doing kind of more professional mastering, Wavelab is a great tool for that. If you need to enhance the sounds, you can do that easily with included plugins within Cubase. So, okay. See more people sending well wishes to Mark Rabin and his family. Yeah, we'll go be in our thoughts, Mark. All right. right, so we see Pablo's doing dinner. All right. All right, great to see Gareth on from Bilbao, Spain. Okay, reading through comments. All right, everyone's happy that everyone from Hot Mess is on. See, GMT says you are a legend. If that's for me, I appreciate the comment. All right, Peter Boy says, hi Greg, it appears my Cubase 14 Pro 60-day trial doesn't like my M Audio Keystation Pro 88. 17 years, Cubase 6.5, no issues connecting, no audio recognized by Cubase 14. Am I alone with this issue? So make sure that you're, I'm not sure if the M Audio Keystation, I thought my impression was it was just a MIDI controller, but make sure that whatever operating system that you're on, that the controller is functioning. Like if you hit the keys and if you look in like the lower right hand corner of your project, we could just see like MIDI activity. So as you hit keys, you know, one, make sure that when you go to like your MIDI inputs, so if we come over here, so it's just add a quick instrument track. And once we go to, you could go to like your MIDI inserts. This is always good. And there's a MIDI monitor plugin. So as I hit MIDI messages, I move my modulation wheel, my pitch bend, we could see that incoming MIDI data is coming in. If that's not coming in from your controller, make sure that the controller is connected to your operating system. If the controller isn't working with your contemporary operating system, I know I had like an original Oxygen 25 that just kind of stopped working with all operating systems because the drivers weren't kept up to date. So I think it was, you know, a donation to Goodwill. Let someone else worry about it, but it was just that device wasn't working anymore with the drivers. So if the device is communicating MIDI information to the operating system, it's not like a Cubase specific thing. If it's communicating to the operating system, then Cubase can see it because we use the, you know, operating system level MIDI communication. So all right, so we see Robin Hannon says, can you do all this in Cubase Elements 12.2? So I'm not sure if it's a specific aspect that you saw, but with, you know, obviously Cubase Elements has kind of a subset of features, but, you know, it's incredibly capable, especially for the price point. But let me know if there's like a specific, if that was in a specific function, and I could probably tell if it's in Elements or not. All right, Charles K. just says, I noticed in the MIDI editor when I select a group of notes, say hi-hat, typing a value into the velocity box doesn't change the level. Maybe a bug on my end. All right, so let's just take a look. Okay, so let's say, here, I'll just erase these. Okay, so let's say we look at, I have these notes selected here. So generally, like, it would change for the selected value. So we see that my velocity here for all these notes is 100. If I have one note selected, I could just come over here and type in like let's say 60, and we can see that the velocity of that one note decreases to 60 if all of my notes are set, and I want it to, let's say I want all the notes to go to 60, I would type in 60 here, and we could adjust kind of proportionality of that. So if I type in 120, we can see that they will all kind of proportionally rise if I wanted them to all be the same value. So let's say if I come, so make sure that the notes are selected. So let's say my MIDI notes here, I'll just add a bunch more. All right, so let's say I have my MIDI notes all kind of at different values. They're fluctuating in velocity if I select all the notes. And I think if I hold down the control or command key and say, I'm going to hold that down and type 100. And type 100, then press the command or control key, and they'll all be set to the same value. So otherwise, when I adjust my velocity here, if they had fluctuations in the velocity, the selected notes, if I hit control or command A, I could adjust the velocity proportionally, just like this, by using the mouse scroll wheel. Or if I wanted those all to be the same, I could double click in the field, say, okay, I want these all to be 120, hold down command or control, then hit enter, and then they're all set to the same value. So let me know if that's helpful for you. So let's say I do 80, I want to do 70, control command, all the same, or just hover over and increase and decrease with the mouse scroll wheel right there. All right, I see just a great point from Jazz Dude. Says the secret lies in the mix plus arrangement, not in the mastering. It's a myth, and you should never try to fix mistakes from the mix in the master channel out. That's a great point. I think all the amazing recordings that we all cherish, I think the one thing that's in common is great arrangements. So if you listen to, like Steely Dan songs are, like they're so highly cherished, but I think their arrangements are so intentional where the musicians aren't kind of playing over top of each other. Their frequencies aren't clashing because the arrangement isn't clashing, and it just makes it just translates to better recordings. And it's always easy to think, okay, I'll fix it in the next step of the process, but sometimes the easiest way to not solve a problem is to not determine what the actual problem is. So if it is an arrangement problem with the song, then, fixing it in a mix or mastering, may not be the most effective solution because it's not solving the true problem. So. All right, so we see from Pastoral Apologetics says, so blessed to have a company that stands behind us and hosts these club meetings so frequently. Thankful in Southeast Texas. Thank you for the kind words. That'll be copied into my monthly report. Appreciate that. All right. Eric Fox asks, hello, Greg. Is there a chance that in some future updates, Cubase 15 will have a native stem separation, not needing spectral layers? So we'll have to just see what comes. I can't comment on future products that aren't released. So, but we'll see what comes in the future. All right, so we see from Sue says, Greg, you're a legend. I just try to help people. I'm an ordinary average guy who's made mistakes before other people, and hopefully I can help, share my knowledge so that other people don't have to make the same mistakes I have. You see Jazz has a great comment. Just ask if he uses a clipper in a master, and he says he masters anti-loud, and that's a great point. Elliot Shiner, a dear friend of mine, is wonderful, probably one of the most highly regarded audio engineers in the world. He mixes so incredibly quiet. Like his whole process is incredibly quiet, where it's almost like a whisper. And it's a really interesting concept because like the room isn't as much of a factor. And he uses, NS10s, swears by NS10s, and he's like, I don't want my speakers to sound good. I want my mix to sound good. And he mixes incredibly quiet. And it's just fascinating to watch. He doesn't get ear fatigue. He can work for like a really long time doing that, and mixes incredibly quiet, and it really just kind of focuses your listening. So it's a great mix tip as well. Try turning down your monitoring level significantly and see how your mixes turn out. All right, Bratman Studio just says, hey Greg, if I recorded my Roland drums in Cubase 14 Pro via audio and would like to quantize my double bass flub, how do I quantize that audio section, warp, or it says, think it is stereo with all the drums included. So if you were going to, record the audio output, if it's going to be a stereo track, it could be hard to move the kick and not affect like the hi-hat that's probably on top of it. What I would do, in the MIDI domain, it's incredibly flexible, so I would record it as MIDI and audio simultaneously. And if you needed to do editing, like I flubbed the kick drum on bar 32, then you could fix that so easily in MIDI. As opposed to audio. If we were to make an analogy, we could say, if we were like, working with a page of printed text, we could, if we have the printout of the text, and we had misspelled words, or we wanted to copy sections, we could get a pair of scissors and cut out the text from the printed page, and then look for other areas in the printed page, and maybe print out another page and copy, cut out that section, and literally like copy and paste using paste onto the other printed paper. So that's what some people have to do. Some people may just go into their word processor and change it at the word processor level so you could fix the problem there. So, and that would be kind of like fixing it in MIDI would be like fixing it in a word processor, versus audio is kind of like fixing like printed text on the actual printed paper. So I would always record, even if someone was like the best keyboard player in the world, if I was recording Stevie Wonder, I would record the MIDI and the audio simultaneously. If he totally nails everything, it's perfect, that's great. If you wanted to try a different sound, the MIDI data is there, so you can say, oh, let's try this sound instead of that one, let's try this instead of that, let's make this note a little louder, let's adjust the velocity of this one note within the chord. The third and seventh in a chord are too soft, let's just bring the velocity of those up. It's so much easier in the MIDI domain. So with your electronic drums, record it as audio and MIDI, and then edit in MIDI, because it's just inherently much easier and it kind of meets our, contemporary expectations of workflow. Okay. All right, reading through comments. So we see Peter Boy saying my sound card is responding to the keyboard, but not in Cubase 14. MIDI into the Mackie producer. 2.2 gets signal, no signal onto Cubase 14 via key station. Okay, so we see my sound card is responding to the keyboard, but not in Cubase 14. Okay, so how do you know that your sound card is responding to the keyboard? So if you could answer that, it says MIDI in the Mackie producer 2.2 gets signal. So I'm not sure if it's a Mackie control that you're using. You know, one other thing to check is just to make sure that if you come over here to your MIDI, go to your studio menu and go to studio setup, and we could come over here to your devices and make sure that you see the MIDI port set up here. Now, if you have a Mackie control, you know, make sure that you don't have, you know, because it could be if you have your Mackie control, make sure that your M Audio keyboard isn't configured as a MIDI remote device, because if it's being configured as a MIDI remote device, it may block that from transmitting MIDI in, because once it's configured as a control, like a remote control, those functions are going to be working in the remote control mode and not transmitting MIDI. Okay, so you say your sound card's responding to keyboard. So if you let me know like how you see the sound card responding, but not in Cubase 14. It says MIDI into the Mackie producer gets signal. So generally, you know, if it's the Mackie control, you know, your Mackie control is probably not in a MIDI interface. So let me know if your M Audio is connected directly to the computer or if it's connected into your Mackie control. So if you could maybe just say, you know, M Audio key station is connected via MIDI ports, or it's connected via USB to computer, or it's connected into the MIDI is going out to my Mackie control. Let me just see if I can find what a Mackie producer is. Don't know off the top of my head. See a Mackie producer bundle. Let me look at that. So I'm not sure if it's like the Onyx audio interface, if you're connected into MIDI into that. So if you give me some more information, we could try to help out more. All right, inactive user asks, says, hey Greg and Chad, how are you all today? My question for today's stream is I want to use direct offline processing, but I don't know how to access it and how I can save a preset that I created. For example, like a gate and a 2:1 ratio compression for overall compression on a vocal. Okay, so let's come over here. I'm going to, let's say I wanted to apply that a gate. Let me just go to like a vocal file here. Okay, so let's say we have our lead vocal here.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot.
And we wanted to apply, so we would come right over here. Let's go to your audio to direct offline processing. All right. So let's go ahead and say, okay, we'll add a plugin. So let's go here to our dynamics and let's say, okay, let's do our Vox comp. Okay. Okay. And let's say we just want to adjust our threshold here. Okay. And you could put in kind of, and let's come over and let's say a noise gate. All right, and we want to set our threshold, say minus 18.5 dB. All right, so once I have this, this has already been applied to the file. So I could come over here and I want to, I could delete these here. So say, okay, and we could go back to, I could say, let's delete all. And we can see that our file here changes as we do this. So I want to, let's come over to say, okay, let's add, let's say our compressor. So let's do a 2:1 ratio. Let's do a noise gate. So again, just come right over here. Okay, so now if we want to save this, we could just say, okay, I want to drop these processes here. And let's come over here, and now we could just kind of save a particular preset. Now, what else is kind of cool that you could do is let's come here. I'll choose to delete all of these. If we have this kind of set up the way we want, let's say,
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long,
so I'm going to put my gate in here. So let's go to our dynamics.
It was 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach, carry us home.
So let's say we'll put our compressor here.
And your heart shone through. It caught my breath while you called me to.
All right, so what I'm going to do is just kind of come over here,
Even now I'm
and
so
I could
in
just
love with
drag,
you, just like a long
and let's make a favorite.
ago.
So we'll call this,
I remember the day that we wed.
so when I want to come over here, we could just say, okay, now I have this as a preset. And I could just say, okay, I have this file selected. And then I could just say, oh, let's just drag that up, and it's already processed for you offline. So again, I could just delete all of the events. If I wanted to do that for the guitar, I could just come over here, and again, we go to our direct offline processing, or hit F7. Okay, I want my guitar part to be processed with those settings. So save it. Boom, it's done. I select the vocal, double click, and it's processed just like that. So once you have it set up, just come over here, like in your inserts. So a lot of times you may be auditioning in real time, and then just drag the inserts over, and this will give you like a favorite, and this will be a collection of multiple plugins. And now you could just say, oh, I really like this for drums every single time, and boom. And all those direct offline processing presets will automatically be applied just in a matter of seconds. And you could trigger those from keyboard shortcuts as well. Okay. Okay, so we see Steve Green just says, hi Greg, thanks. Will I be able to access newly recorded audio sample in Media Bay, or will it only be accessed by the folder location I created? Okay. All right, so let's do a new project. All right, and let's put it on desktop. Okay, so come here, let's record some audio. Give it a name. Okay, so here's our file. All right, so let's come over to Media Bay. All right, so let's go to this computer, to desktop. I think we called it November 4th. Oh, it's November 4th test. So I'm just going to rescan. Oh, so I have an IC set up there. So there's our test record. So I'll do another recording here. I had a filter connected. So let's say to test. So we have test record that was already in there, and to test 01. So now when we come over to so right after, you may just have to rescan disk, and then you'll see the to test 01 automatically appear. So you may just have to real quick the first time, like right after, but then next time you start Cubase, it would automatically rescan that for you. All right, see, Peter Boy says, I'm the George Martin of Steinberg Cubase guy. That's awful big shoes to fill. So, but thank you for the kind words. George just says, I love mixing quietly. It's very revealing. Getting a balancer and turn it up to test punch and impact, but quiet mixing for me has always resulted in a more balanced mix. Yeah, give it a try. Okay, so we see from Ali Al Zaire says, hi, it looks like the range tool behavior has changed in Cubase 14. Can you explain what has been modified and highlight any new useful workflow improvements related to it? All right, so let's see if I remember all the. All right, so let's say if we're here, so I think now we can, easily kind of move. And with our range, so it's easier to kind of move. Let's say if let's see if I remember. So I think we could also, when we come over here to edit some of the new things, we say range to next event, range to next, enlarge range to next event. So let's say if we're here, I have my range on this particular event here. And we go to edit to select, I think it's under select, and we could say range to next hit point. We could say, range to next event. So we go, okay, let's go to select, range to next hit point, previous hit point, enlarge range to next, we could range to next audio segment, so we have kind of these ways of just, when we go to select of, range encompassing audio segment, range to the previous. So if we have kind of different if I have my range selection like that, we could just say, let's get to our range, and we'll say enlarge range to next audio segment. So we have different range options there. Also, when we come over here, if I have a range selected, let's say if I split the range, now when I go back to like the object selection tool, the range selection will still be maintained. So if I come over here, I could just say, okay, I want to take that. Let's shift X, we'll split the range. We could also, in 14, just come over here. If I want to do like clip gain, I could select a range without having to split and have access to my clip gain. So if there's a breath here that was annoying you, you could just say, okay, I want to dial in this breath here, and then I could just grab the top line there. So a lot of things just kind of more streamlined to work with the range tool. So ability to select to the next hit point, to the next event, all that type of stuff has been incorporated in 14. Okay, so you see from Peter Boy, just says Mackie sound card and both. Says M audio into key station into Mackie, yes, it's the Onyx. Okay, so when you say the M audio into the key station, I thought that the key station was the M audio. So let me know if you're taking MIDI out or USB out. So if you're taking MIDI out from the M audio key station into the like a 5-pin DIN MIDI cable on the Mackie Onyx interface, make sure that on the key station that you don't have it set to transmit MIDI over USB. If you're using the MIDI connections, you probably have to set in the device itself to transmit MIDI over the MIDI ports or over the USB ports. So let me know if you're connecting the the key station controller, and I'm just because I thought the key station was the M audio controller, but you say M audio into key station and key station into the Mackie. Yes, it's the Onyx. So, but you may have to make sure that you're that the M audio key station, which I think is the key station, is transmitting MIDI over USB or over standard MIDI connections. All right, so Bratman Studio just asks, says, Greg, can you explain how to use the elastic drop-down algorithm and why they're different and how to use them from one to the other? Boy, that was a badly phrased question, he writes. That I understood. So let's go ahead and take a look. I'll just... All right, let me just find my... All right, so let's say we have our drum loop here. So let's take a look at our different algorithms for time stretching. Okay, so okay, so let's come over here. We'll just copy this a couple times. And let's put it in. All right, so when we have, let's say we have our audio here. So we can see, like looking at this drum loop, that's probably originally set to 83 beats per minute. So if I come over here, let's change our tempo to 83. All right, so now when we want to have this automatically follow our different tempo, we would use different time stretching algorithms. So if we select this, we can see our different algorithms here. So these are standard. These are probably older, maybe not as high quality as the Elastique, which are kind of industry standard. And we see these broken down into 3 different types of categories. We have the Elastique Pro time, which is default. We also have pitch. So if I were to kind of differentiate, so let's break down the 3 different categories that we have. So once we select, we have Elastique Pro, we have Formant, as well as Efficient. So if we were on a computer from 20 years ago, and when we're changing tempos of multiple audio files at once, we can just simply, so we can, use the efficient mode. So that's going to use less CPU processing. When we want to preserve the formants, and, formant preservation is like when you raise the pitch of audio, how some, we're talking about the Chipmunks Christmas album, how when you raise the voice, it changes the character. So sometimes it may make a male voice sound female, or a female voice sound more masculine. So we kind of change the nature of the voice. Formant preservation will keep that. And then we're going to have our normal algorithms. So we have kind of the normal algorithm, one with formant preservation, which is going to be good for kind of pitched material, and one that's efficient. So those are the 3. Within each of those, we have one that's for time, and that's going to be more for rhythmic material. Pitch, and we could think of that as more for vocals, maybe guitars, piano, stuff where the pitch is really critical. And then we have tape. So what tape is going to allow us to do is, if we have our audio here, and let's switch the algorithm to tape, this would behave much like an analog tape machine. So when I go to my tempo track, so we'll add a tempo track here. And as we come over to our tempo track, I want to gradually increase the tempo. So when we increase the tempo, it's going to change the pitch just like an analog tape, like what we call vary speed. So when we come here, we'll hear the pitch and tempo of it increase or decrease based on the tempo. So that's what the tape does. So we think of, we have the different levels of efficiency if we want formant preservation, or just the normal algorithm. And then within each of those, we want to emphasize our rhythm, the pitch, or do we want it to behave like an analog tape machine's vary speed function, where if you slow the tape machine and record, it's a lower pitch. You speed it up, then the pitch increases with the speed. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Rick. All right, so we see Fly V says, tonight I'm going to make a new track. Thanks for all the info, Greg. All right, so we see Garrett says, about to upload the final tunes for G Drive. So I saw your email come in on my phone. Thanks. All right. Let me just go back, see some questions we may have had. All right, another question that was emailed in. It says, Adrian here from Auckland, New Zealand. I'm on Windows 10, 11, Cubase Pro 13 and 14. It says, on your October 17th live stream, you helped talk about duplicates for VST presets for Steinberg instruments in Media Bay and how one should check duplicate folder and original folder to help identify which one VST preset is being used by the project or backup projects if messy. It says, my question is, if needed, how does a user who is missing a preset for a given project find a way to get that file back into the media bay to support the project, but also more importantly, the ability for projects on a wider basis to be able to find the files if they have various different locations that their projects are looking for. Sorry if that's a hard one or in advance. So usually when we get messages, ability for projects on wider basis, able to find the files, usually the presets, the project will load without the presets being there. The presets, so if we have, let's say we open up a plugin on this particular project here. All right, so let's say we make a preset. So let's say as we're playing. All right, so let's go ahead and save this preset. Okay, so I'm going to save this project. Okay. Now let's come over to, all right, so we do this. I'm going to just save this all the way down. We'll move this to 22 and save the preset again. All right, so all the way down, all the way up. All right, so we call it. So let me come over. I'm going to save this project again. And let's jump back to our user presets for VST effects presets. All right, so here's our .tube. I'm going to right click, reveal in Finder, and I'm going to move this to the trash. Okay. So I'm going to close this project and let me open the project and see if the plugins will still be preserved even if the preset is gone. So we'll go here to recent projects, activate it. So even if the preset was thrown away, the settings from the preset will be there. Now, often when I get a message similar to this, it's indicating when files are missing. So like sometimes people who maybe aren't as diligent with file management, who maybe like recorded, audio files into multiple folders within their project. If that is kind of the case, you may get messages like if those folders are moved, to get around that, I would always, when you go to, one of the things to do is in the preferences, if you go to editing to audio, is, on import audio files, just always, copy them to the project folder. So if you check that, then all the files will be copied into the project folder, so everything is consolidated. Before saving the project, if you have files, audio files that are scattered, At that point, we could just choose to go to your media menu and do a prepare archive, and that would move all of the files that are being referenced in the project into the audio folders of the current project folder. So that way that can consolidate everything there. But it seems like, as we just saw, I threw away the preset, but the settings of the plugins are preserved in the project independently of the preset itself. So all right, so we have another question. Just says, on a laptop with low resolution on screen lower than 1920 by 1080, should high DPI be turned off? So you're not going to gain anything by turning on high DPI. So, but some screens may be showing a 1920 by 1080. If it's a 4K display, you may have, 4 pixels stacked for each pixel. So like, a 1920 by 1080 is considered a 1K resolution or HD resolution, which is the resolution I use. But if you have a 4K screen, you may be able to kind of scale that. So I don't think that you're gaining anything. It may look a little sharper on your particular project, but it may not actually, it may not actually have any benefits to doing it, depending on if the screen you're looking at is 4K. So, sometimes you could have higher resolutions that are kind of, where the pixels are kind of stacked to make it sharper at a lower resolution. So, but I think, so try turning it off and see if you have any adverse effects from disabling it. Okay, let's go back to live questions. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to smash the like button. All right, Michael Pierce is joining. Great to see you on. Great to see you on the Zoom meetup. It's a good Halloween mask that you had. And he's wishing everyone is safe, well, and having a great week. Hope you got the pictures okay for our U.S. Halloween pictures they sent over to you. See, Bratman Studio says, yes, thanks for the elastic explanation. All right, channel ripoff, just saying, what's up, Greg? So thanks for joining us today. You see Tim K has an early morning appointment. Thanks for joining us today. Hopefully we'll see you on Friday. Okay, so we see from, I think it's Zai Fernando, says, greetings from Norway. Could you give some tips on how to keep the Cubase projects constantly backed up? Is it some automation for this? So if you're always careful about file management, and I would always have one project folder per song. And if you have this particular preference on, again, as we just discussed, going to editing to audio on import audio files, copy to, especially if you use a lot of built-in loops and contents, just copy all files to the project folder. And if you record so with that preference, all the files will be, placed into the audio folder of the project folder. So when you create a project, every project gets a new folder that is unique for a particular song. I've seen many very incredibly successful engineers go through the nightmare where they just put 5 different clients' albums all into the same folder. So audio engineering is a very significant thing for composers and audio engineers is file management and being on top of it. Now, if you make a unique project folder for each song, each project, and then have that particular preference checked, automatically all of the files will be moved into your project folder. So it's literally just a matter of saving your project. It's when files are copied and that preference isn't set so that some audio files are in this folder, some are in a different folder, some are on a different drive. If that's the case, then you have to be more mindful of your kind of file management. And then you could just choose to do from the media menu or from the pool a prepare archive. And the prepare archive function will allow you to consolidate into the project folder where all of your files are. So if you have messed up and you weren't as diligent with your file management, do a prepare archive and save the project, and that will copy all the files. Another fail-safe method is kind of maybe like a last resort. If you weren't good with your file management, is open up the project, go to your file menu, and choose backup project. So if you have, 5 clients' albums all in the same folder, and you have, 14,000 audio files called audio01 _ followed by a number. If you're at that state where you didn't name the files as you recorded them, and multiple files from multiple projects and clients are in the same folder, then I would go to your file menu, backup project, and that will take all of the audio files in this particular project, and we'll choose a new location. And as we do that, we will be prompted to give it a name. We could say we want to keep the current project active. And we have some choices like, do we want to minimize audio files? So if we have, if we use 4 seconds of a 1 minute long recording, we're not going to back up to 56 seconds that were not used. Do we want to make the direct offline processing permanent? Or do we want to be able to undo that? Do we want to remove unused files? Do we want to back up the video or not? Do we want to back up the mixdown folder? So we can, and once we go through this process, it will move all the files to a brand new kind of a virgin folder, so that all of those particular files can be played back and you don't have to worry about the old one. You could delete it because these are all going to be copied into a new location so that your project can be consolidated and all the files into one particular folder. So, all right. All right, Flyvy asks, is it smart to keep a drum track within 8 bars, or can I sync as I create? So yeah, you don't have to keep a drum track within 8 bars, so you can sync as you create, or move different tracks around. So there's no, as long as it sounds good, it's good. Seventh Resonance asks, any news on Cubase 15? So as soon as it's out, Steinberg will announce it. So when it's all done and ready. So, but usually we are good at not making announcements. See, Seventh Resonance says, nice, I'm planning to move to Cubase. Yeah, it's great. I hope to see you on many more live streams. Michael Teams says he always learns something new on the Zoom social meetups too. John Costigan is just saying thanks for the review of archiving and file management. It's really streamlined if I remembered. So. All right, so we see from Seventh Resonance, how do you deal with the trim automation trimming only after the cursor when playing? Okay. me just come over here. All right, let me just switch the algorithm. All right, so let's say we want to do some quick automation on this. All right, so let's go ahead and all right, I'll just hide the so we can see it a little easier. All right, so let's go into our automation mode here, and let's put it on trim. Okay, so now what I want to do is if I come over here, so let's okay, so let's say I just wrote in automation. So I just wrote in my trim automation so we could see kind of the trim automation here. We can see what was the original automation, how it's affected. All right, so let's see, how do you do trim automation? Trimming only after the cursor when playing. So it's, you know, like as we just saw, so I just wrote in the automation. So if I wanted to come over here, we could just say, let's freeze all the trim automation in a project. And now everything will just kind of play back right there. So you have the different freeze options. So as soon as you do that, all right. All right, Michael Pierce says, I wanted to ask, Clap was an interesting move, but what does new licensing for ASIO and VST3 do for Steinberg and us? So I think one, it kind of opens up, you know, the VST and ASIO kind of opens it up for a lot of non-DAW uses, you know, so, you know, probably makes sense to have low latency information going on, you know, in broadcast software like OBS or for video editing software. So I think it just, you know, I thought Clap was kind of an interesting move. I thought it was a bit, you know, I thought it was such a great format that the company that developed it once, you know, I find it interesting that they're still supporting VST. So if it was so great, they probably, you know, would only do Clap. But I think VST3 is very ubiquitous for, you know, being, you know, like a true cross-platform open solution. And ASIO is a wonderful solution on the Windows platform. So I think it just opens it up for more developers and, you know, and more people outside of kind of music and digital audio workstation realms to be able to utilize it and be aware of it. So we see from Seventh Resonance says, yeah, but it acts as another layer of automation rather than just a global offset. So, you know, the trim will be an offset until you freeze the trim. So, and that way you could just kind of grab a fader and bring everything down. All right, you see Pablo has to take off. You can see Gareth is saying perhaps ASIO for Linux. I heard a great description of Linux. Someone mentioned it's like, I think I saw it on Facebook. Someone's like, it's like going to a restaurant and it's like ordering a meal at a restaurant and having to rebuild the restaurant for every meal. So. All right, so we see from Flyvy says my favorite on Cubase is the purple. So it's got it all set up. Drums are red and synth is purple. People are very passionate about what tracks are particular colors. So we see from Michael Pierce says, I saw some possibilities for researchers, but I wonder what it may do for us. So I think it makes it a lot easier for, what low barriers there were for developing VST3 plugins, I think are kind of eradicated. So if there's anyone that wanted to, that had issues with VST3 licensing and, having to sign up to be a developer, all that is kind of a non-issue anymore. All right. See, Michael Pierce has definite feelings on colors for his drums. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions that kind of sneak in. I thank everyone for all the great wonderful questions that people have asked. Hope that everyone has learned some new tips and tricks. Let's see, Bratman Studio says maybe on the next on the Zoom social meetup that people could share some of the tracks that they're working on, so that'd be great to hear. And Bratman Studios, or Michael Pierce just saying it'd be great to listen to each other's music. All right, we'll see if there's more questions that pop in. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions today. I hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. We'll wait a minute, see if there's other questions that pop in. So once again, we'll be having our next Club Cubase live stream on, we'll be doing it on, Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Very great to see John Barry on. Michael Pierce is claiming to be officially retro now that he's on Windows 10. So I generally tend not to upgrade operating. I haven't seen many benefits of upgrading operating systems on computers that are working great. So all right, we'll give it a minute, see if there's other questions. If not, we'll wrap up. So Keith Sandberg says, thanks for the videos, one of the best parts of Cubase. Let's see, Michael Pierce says, thank you, Greg. Sorry, late. Students will be less late on Friday. So Sub 403 says, I'm on Cubase 11. What happens if my dongle dies? There's not going to be a way to reactivate your Cubase 11 license on an e-licenser. The server's been shut down since April-ish. So, but I've had my, I have had my same USB e-licenser. I just want to see how long I could keep it. I had it going. I still have it connected to my PC, and I've had that one since 2001, 2002. So they're pretty resilient. But if you have the chance to upgrade, it's always a great time to upgrade to get onto the Steinberg licensing, so you don't have to worry about that. You can still use your Cubase 11 on your USB e-licenser and have access to the later ones, the later versions. And it's probably been 3.5 years or so. So Bratman Studio just asking have I heard anything about the new Tahoe OS? I think that Steinberg kind of, I think they have official statements. I think everything is good with it, but I think that Steinberg posted the official compatibility statements this week for Tahoe. All right, so we see John Costigan saying thanks to everyone. Michael Team says, everyone have a great week and be here on Friday. The frivolity will continue and the knowledge will flow. All right, so it looks like we are out of questions. I want to thank again everyone for wonderful questions. It's always a joy to be part of the community and be able to help people out. All right, so we see George saying, thanks for your incredible insights and your patience with answering questions. I'm looking forward to listening in when you present the features in the next Cubase version. Yeah. It's always a good one to get done. So, all right. Sub403 says, thank you, Greg. Keep the hangouts going. I see Jazz Dude has posted a link for me. I'll go check it out. All right, so with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone again for all the wonderful questions. Hope it's been helpful for people, and we'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Goodbye.